how everything is working now. Uh, and I was just celebrating so much because we finally got the video to work and all things going on. And then, the last minute something didn't quite work, and now here we are, and it's only 6:01. So I think we have all the problems solved, and that was really important to me to get it solved for today, so we won't have another time like last week when it just would not work, and that was no fun at all. So let's make sure that I will do my best to make sure that that never happens again. So, welcome everybody. This is an exciting topic tonight because it happens. You marry somebody, you think that somebody is just fine. The in-laws seem to be behaving in ways that are accepting and lovely, maybe a red flag here and there, and then, whoops, all of a sudden the screws start to tighten and things are not as pleasant as you thought they were going to be. And then it starts impinging on your relationship. All kinds of things can happen. So I wanted to just spend time on tonight's live stream to dedicate it to this problem of hijackal in-laws and also hijackal in-laws. Either way that you parse it out, it has the same effect. Yeah, not great, not happy, not what you wanted. So that's what I want to talk with you about. And I can see that I have some chat things here that need to go away. And then there we go. Then I'll be able to see the chat. So, everybody knows where to find me because now you can see it clearly on the screen. If there's any way that you want to get in contact with me, you want to read my blogs, you want to go to my podcasts, anything at all, you can find it there at transformingrelationship.com. And I'm Dr. Rhoberta Shaler. I think you probably already know that because that's why you're here. So anybody have hijackal in-laws? Anybody on the call specifically because they have hijackal in-laws or hijackal in-laws? Or maybe you did have and you've had an experience of it. Or maybe you're co-parenting with a hijackal that you're removed from now, but the in-laws are still getting in the way. Anybody have that experience? So just put things in the chat as you like to, and I will respond to them as they come up. So I think that there are 7 main things that hijackal in-laws are, and that they seem to practice, seem to like to have in their repertoire. And those are that they are controlling, they're critical, they're cruel, they're competitive, they're demanding, they're domineering, and they're divisive. Sound about right? Certainly they're controlling. Usually they're critical. Frequently they're cruel. Mostly they're competitive because they're competing with you to keep their child away from you or to have you not approved of so that they can be right about their child should do what they want them to do, not what their child that you married wants you to do. And then they're demanding and dominant and definitely divisive because they want to come between you and the other members of your family. They would sometimes even after you have children, what they want to do is kind of take the children and carve you out of the equation. Anybody had that experience? They want to take the children over to their side. I was working with a client the other day who was pregnant, and she doesn't live with the father of the child. She wasn't married to the father of the child. And she said to me, "What do you think of this?" He said that he's planning to come to the hospital when I have the baby and take the baby for the first 3 days. I said, no, not going to happen. But that's the kind of mindset that these preposterous, incredulous things should be happening that are not healthy. They're not part of what makes for health for the child or anybody concerned. It's only about these hijackal in-laws, that they have a decision, that they are the only ones that matter. They are the arbiters of everything that should happen. Everything should happen their way and to their liking. And, preferably you should fall in line. And that's really difficult. So they do things, they'll visit unannounced. They'll just show up. And then if you're wise, you and your partner set a boundary and say, no, our home doesn't work that way. Lovely to see you, but please give us a call before you come. And you need to get the agreement of your partner and all these things, of course. And that's where sometimes it falls apart, because your partner's kind of caught between that rock and hard place. Well, I don't know. Well, right there is the crux of the issue many times, that you need to get some help for you and your partner to go and say, okay, we're the unit now. We are the couple. We are the parents of these children. We are each other's number one person. And then from there on, we manage the other people in our lives. And that's an agreement that you must have. And if you have a hijackal partner, which often happens when, of course, they have hijackal parents, they will want to side with their hijackal parents. And so that becomes another way of losing ground immediately. And it's very important for us to talk about these things, because if that's happening, you need to see it as a huge red flag. Huge, huge, huge red flag, and it needs to be attended to, because it will only get worse. So, it disappeared. Her message has disappeared. Okay, so as anything sounds familiar, please feel free to say. So Vancouver says, I do not have in-laws. I'm not married, but my hijackal male friend of many, many years' mother is super nice to me, and I don't know how to trust her. Her son lives in another state, her and I in the same state. Oh, is there a reason that you don't know whether you can trust her? Is she too nice? Is she too intrusive? Does she want to be too close to you? Does she want to know what you're up to and why you're up to? And is she still with the father of your hijackal male friend? What are the dynamics there? Those are things to look at, because she may want to connect with you to have power over you. She may connect with you because she was disempowered in her relationship, and she, all depends on what the conversation is. So see if you can tell me a little bit more about that, and I'll respond to it. So let's just go back to a few things that hijackal in-laws do. They visit unannounced. And as I said, you and your partner have to make some agreements, some basic agreements about how your family will run. What's okay for your family? What are going to be your family traditions? How is that going to be? You're going to have to decide what you do at particular celebrations during the year. What happens, not by default, but by decision that you make. Where will we spend Christmas or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or whatever you celebrate, or Thanksgiving or the 24th of May, whatever it is, whatever traditions are important to you, you and your partner need to make a decision about, this is how we do it. And then you make an announcement to the world that this is how we do it. Because when things get difficult, particularly if you have a hijackal in-laws, when things get difficult, they want it their way. And then they want to make you wrong for not doing it their way. And then they bring out the big three. And the big three are, they want to instill fear, they want you to feel obligated, and then they want to make you feel guilty. And as soon as anybody brings out fear, obligation, or guilt, you want to go, oh no, I'm not having any, thank you. No, it's not going to work like that. So it's important for you and your partner to have those conversations. I was on a radio talk show out of LA today called LA Talk Answers for the Family, and I'm sure there's a replay you can listen to. It was a whole hour. And the topic of conversation that we had was my book, Kaizen for Couples. But the host had a couple come in who had read the book, and then we were talking about instances of this and how the couple has to be in alignment. And the host asked me, well, what do you think the value of premarital or cohabiting counseling is? And I said, invaluable. Absolutely invaluable, because the kinds of agreements that you need to make, understanding each other's values, what that looks like in practice, what that would look like in a home, what would look like in a development of a family, all those things have to be talked about before you make a decision to move in with someone or marry them. And I know you may very well be sitting there saying, oh, yeah, I wish I'd known all that. It's way too late for me. But it is important, and it's something that we have to do now. If we didn't do it before, we have to know what our values are, our vision for our life, our beliefs, and what our agreements are about how our family will run regardless of the larger family. So Yehuda says, yes, he says passive-aggressive things about me to the kids, and on different occasions scolds them for not listening to me. Makes you think why they don't listen to me. Yeah. Well, those are power moves. You know, when he wants to look like the good guy, he says you should listen to your mother because that's what he wants them to remember. And the rest of the time he forgets and he just do it my way or the highway. And that's the way hijackals do. It all depends on the audience too. That will make a big difference. So it completely confuses the children. And that is a problem. Now, Vancouver says, she says all the right things. She invites me to church family events. She's married to the man who raised him since he was 2 months. Her son went missing in action during my dad's death. He passed October 4th and he went silent. His mom says she wants me in her space. And did you ask her why? Why would you like me in your space? What is it that you would like to do? It's quite within your rights to ask those questions. You don't say it straightforwardly, not quite as I say, what do you want to do that for? Not that way. But to say, oh, well, I'm interested, as your son and I are not in a permanent relationship and we haven't made any decisions about our living arrangements. Tell me a little bit more about why you'd like to spend more time together. And see if you can find out. Could be that she's lonely. Could be that she wants to know what you really know and what you really think about her son. Could be that she wants to warn you off about her son. Any number of things could be true. But I can understand your reluctance and your question. Why do you want that to happen? So again, back to these family agreements that you make. I work with people all over the world because I work through video conferencing, and I was chatting with some people in Australia one day, and their child had married a hijackal who had hijackal parents, and the disarray that would happen around family events, celebrations, birthdays, holidays, it was phenomenally bad. And so my request to them was to see how they could possibly limit the number of possibilities that they put in, like do something off day or something. I raised my 3 kids by myself mostly, and worked full time. So I just made it easy. I just said to my kids, I don't want you to have to make decisions and things about celebrations. We will celebrate Christmas on the first weekend of the new year. And so they didn't have to make any choices. They didn't have to make decisions. They could just go off and do whatever it was that needed doing without any interruption, knowing that we had created our own tradition. That worked for us, but find out what works for you. And you're welcome for that advice, but do ask her, do engage her in conversation and find out what's up. So things like that. Find out, as I said to my people in Australia, could you make it an effortless choice for them so that you don't get into the mix and the pull and the shove and the push and the why don't you and you shoulds of the family? So the hijackal in-laws have nothing to push against, and that can be a very important thing. Now, another thing hijackal in-laws like to do is they like to get into your head, get you to talk about ways that you're vulnerable, little secrets you might have, maybe some fears you have. And they like to cozy up to you and get you to feel safe and then spill the beans, right? And then, even though you've said, well, I never tell anybody this, but because you're my mother-in-law or father-in-law, I'll share it with you because we're family. And the next thing you know, often in public at a family event, they spill the beans. They just tell your secrets because they want to be the ones who know. They want to be the ones on top of the pile. And then you feel so betrayed. You feel violated, and you have been. So watch for the trickiness of them getting up close and personal with you. And I think, Vancour, that's one of the things that you may be saying is she sidling up to me trying to get some inside information? Should I be really cautious? And it's a good question to have. So just ask her straight up. And another thing that these hijackal in-laws like to do is they demand to know your secrets. If they don't get you into a vulnerable space and you don't seem to be sharing freely and the conversation is flowing, they will say, well, you're part of our family now, we need to know everything about you. Don't withhold things. After all, you're going to have children with my child, and I need to know everything about you. Never forget that you are entitled to your boundaries. You absolutely are entitled to your boundaries. You do not have to tell them everything. And again, remember, there you go, the fog. They're making it fearful. They're suggesting an obligation. And then they're trying to make you feel guilty if you don't do it. Watch out for the fog. It's a very insidious thing. And you may have seen that in your partner, or maybe you've had it in a parent. I certainly did. I mean, that was certainly something my mother used. She was always keeping me in the fog. I will withhold this, so we had the fear thing. A good daughter would, so we had the obligation thing, and you should be ashamed of yourself, so we had the guilt thing. Sound familiar at all? Yeah, this stuff happens, right? Another thing that hijackal in-laws will do is they will pretend to be or actually be very offended if you say no to their requests. Because after all, they are the top of the pole. They are the top of the totem. They're the top of the family. And what they want should come first, in their opinion. But that necessarily is not your opinion, right? So when you have a request made of you and you say, no, I wouldn't like to go there, no, I don't care to join that, or no, I wouldn't like to go in on buying that or creating that event or whatever. Because they are a family, you might want to add one sentence about that you maybe do it another time or whatever, but you don't have to come up with a reason. Now, this applies to every situation in your life. You do know that no is a complete sentence, right? That there is no reason why you have to come up with a reason that they will buy why you don't want to do what they want you to do, no matter who that person is. Now, maybe if it's a boss, you might want to reconsider, and there may be times it would be wise to reconsider, but generally as a rule, you have an absolute right to say no. And do you accept that? Will you allow yourself to just say, no, I wouldn't like to do that, thanks? And then fall silent. Just be quiet. If somebody says, well, why not? Then you got a little red flag about that person, or at least one that's a little bit darker pink than it should be. Because people who are emotional grown-ups, in my opinion, don't ask questions to which they're not equally willing to hear yes or no as the answer. So if somebody is expecting to hear only a yes, they're going to make you wrong if you say no, and you know that. But hold on, you are entitled to say no. Anybody have difficulty saying no on the call? You know, I'm Canadian by birth. I'm very, very polite by training. And it took me a long time to learn to be able to say no with a smile and not have to give a reason that I thought they would buy. You know, it's just something that we have to learn. And that goes with the being assertive. And I've said it before, but I'll repeat it again for people who may have forgotten or not heard it before, that my definition of being assertive is to A, recognize that you deserve to take up space and draw a breath on this planet, and therefore B, you have the absolute right to say what you think, feel, need, and want, as long as you do not mention another human by name or pronoun. That's my definition of being assertive. You have the right to say what you think, feel, need, or want, as long as you don't mention another human by name or pronoun. So you're just speaking about yourself, and you are absolutely within your rights to do that. But Megan says, I have difficulty saying no, and I'm getting better. I don't say no, I'm sorry, but I have something else. I just say no or no, thank you. Great. Perfect. Hello, Audrey. I'm glad you like the definition. Yes, when just to be able to say no, thank you, and say it genuinely with a smile, you have every right to do that. And if you're meeting somebody, maybe you're just meeting these potential in-laws or could be potential in-laws, don't get into the people-pleasing mode. Show them who you are right up front. Because then, if it's not going to work, you will know. Now, sure, we all give everybody the benefit of the doubt in healthy situations. And, we're not going to try and offend somebody in the beginning. But don't be pretending that you're going to do everything somebody wants you to do just so they'll like you. And then when you do start saying no, they'll say, well, that's not very good. You've never been like that before. Who do you think you are saying no to me? And then we have a problem. So whether it's hijackal in-laws or it's somebody else in your life, learn to say no with some strength, and not an aggressive no, just a simply confident, strong no. No thanks, I'd rather not do that, or I'm not interested, or that won't work for me. And just go on talking. Don't leave a space, just go on talking. That's a powerful thing to do. Now, boundaries. I've done several YouTube videos on boundaries and several podcasts on boundaries. You can find them all on the YouTube, or go over to transformingrelationship.com and click on podcasts and you'll find them there. And some people don't have very much faith in themselves to know what's okay with them and what's not okay with them. So the first step is to get very clear about what's okay with you, what's not okay, and then to express that. To say, this works for me, this doesn't work for me, could we do this? And look for agreement. But never set a boundary that is negotiable. Boundaries need to be relatively non-negotiable. They may change, 6 months from now you may know the person better and you may open the boundary a little bit, but generally you want to set boundaries that are non-negotiable. It'll never be all right with me for someone to speak badly or damagingly to one of my children or grandchildren. I'll speak up. It's just not all right with me. I have a boundary about that. Right? And you need to know where your boundaries are and be willing to express them. So as a human being, that's a wonderful thing for us to develop, or is the ability to recognize, clarify, express, and maintain our boundaries. And then it's a great thing for the relationship. And I know you might be thinking, well, it's not so great because people don't like it and it creates an eruption and all that. It's still great because it shows you what's really up. And it helps you make decisions about, is that what I really want? And that's worth it. So that's what makes it great. So you need to have boundaries. You need to clarify them. If you're just starting to set boundaries with somebody, and maybe with the hijackal in-laws, start with small things and then work up to the larger things. And that way you can get people used to the fact that you will be clear and you will be direct. And remember, I always say the genius of good communication, as John Powell wrote in one of his books, is to be totally kind and totally honest at the same time. So you want to practice being totally kind and totally honest at the same time. And then you want to use my definition of assertiveness so that you can say whatever you think, feel, need, and want, as long as you do not mention another human by name or pronoun. Now you're in great shape. Right? If somebody takes offense to it, that tells you something about that somebody. But you're in good shape. You're in alignment with who you want to be. You're living your values. You're living from what you believe. You are living your truth and expressing what's true and so for you. And that feels good. And then you may have to watch the fallout sometimes, particularly if you've just woken up and started doing this. There are going to be people who are going to say, well, you've changed. And they're going to think that's a bad thing. And you'll have to tell them, yes, I have. I've learned that I'm worth expressing what my boundaries are. And I'm loving it. And you're entitled to do that. So there are other things that hijackal horrors in the in-law department show up as. You know, they have uses for people. They don't have much love to give, but they have a lot of uses for people, hijackals do. And they have uses for children. They want to take the child. They want to play children against one another. I had a client whose horrific in-laws, one grandchild would text the grandmother and say, you know, I'd really like to go and see that movie. And then, oh, just a big mistake. But the grandmother would text the other grandchild and say, oh, I'd love to see the movie with you. And then ignore the child whose request it was in the first place. And that's how hijackal in-laws run. That's how hijackal grandparents run. And so then they will withhold their attention, or they'll refuse to see you, or they'll only want to see their child and they want you to stay home. And that's really hurtful. It's really divisive. And as I said, they're divisive or divisive, depending on which side of the 49th parallel you live on. And that happens. And all of these things are things to be observed. You're going to feel them. You're going to have thoughts about them. But observe them. As long as you are doing things in alignment with your values and your vision for your life and your beliefs, then you just observe what other people do. You don't have to make value judgments about that. The only judgments that you make are how you interact with them and if you continue to interact with them. What we need to know is how they behave, and that's what I'm endeavoring to help you with today when we're looking at the horrors of hijackal in-laws. So we've talked about boundaries, and we've talked about the way that they will mishandle the grandchildren. I happen to be the grandchild of a hijackal, and my grandmother was probably the most miserable human I have ever met, next to her daughter, who was worse. But my grandmother decided that my cousin, my cousin, whose mother and father had less funds than mine, who didn't get music lessons, decided that I was a terrible person and I shouldn't be spoken to because the eldest son's child could not have the music lessons that I was getting. And so I was constantly derided, while my cousin was always taken care of, and, you know, the sun shone wherever she went. And that's the way these things work. So hijackal in-laws have a need to demand their child's time and to feel offended even for no good reason, or want the attention, or need to talk to them at inopportune moments, or demand their attendance at things. And then they'll pretend that you don't matter. It doesn't matter if you can't come, but they want to be divisive in the family. And then they do other uncool things, like what we call smear campaigns. So, they'll say to their child, "Oh, I can see you're having a terrible time with your partner. And of course, we know that, your partner has problems. But don't worry, we see it. We're on your side. We'll take care of it." Triangulation. Don't allow that to happen. Make sure that your relationship with your partner is tight and that you are the two people who are making decisions about your relationship and your family. And yes, if your partner is a hijackal, you're going to have trouble with it, right? It's just the case. You're going to have trouble with it, and only you can decide what troubles you can tolerate and which troubles are intolerable, which are healthy enough for the children to be around and which are absolutely not healthy enough for the children to be around. Really big things. So the smear campaigns, the triangulating, and Susan Forward, she's a great author, and you may have read some of her stuff, and she talks about engulfing, how the hijackal in-laws have to engulf their child, and then they want to engulf their child and the child's mate and the children. And she said this phrase, they want to live as though their child never left. They want to live as though their child never left, and they have complete control over everything their child does, even if they didn't have control over what their child did when the child was living with them. But they want to live that way. So all hijackals want supply on demand. They want what they want when they want it. And they absolutely believe you should give it to them because, of course, they're always right and you are always wrong. And everything is your fault and they are perfect. So they came from somewhere, and most often they came from hijackal parents who have now become your in-laws. So I really want to open this up. If you have questions about what I'm talking about or offshoots of what I've spoken about, or you have questions that are way off in left field and you'd just like to know what I have to say, go ahead and put them in the chat. I'm happy to answer them because I just wanted to start the conversation and put out some of these things so you could clearly see what the likely patterns are when you have hijackal in-laws, and that I could validate those for you by what I've had to say so far. You're not crazy, and you do not have unrealistic expectations. If you want your partner to work with you to create your family, as opposed to doing what hijackal in-laws want you to do. And you have that right. And it's so important. Now, Audrey, you said that you loved the definition of assertiveness, and I have all kinds of definitions of these things. I have this sitting here beside me because this is the book that I was talking about on the LA Talk Show today, Kaizen for Couples, Smart Steps to Save, Sustain, and Strengthen Your Relationship. And they asked me on the show today, why did you write that particular book? And I said, because so many of my clients said, have you written all this down somewhere? Because I put everything that I believe that creates healthy relationships, strategies, things to check for, all of that in that book. And it's available on Amazon. Again, it's called Kaizen for Couples, Japanese word for small, positive, incremental improvements. Kaizen for Couples, it's available in print, obviously, but it's also available as a downloadable. So if you're having difficulties with your relationships or you'd like to feel more confident in your relationship skills, that's a really good book to go through. And in there I talk about that definition of assertiveness and how to report out your thoughts, feelings, needs, and wants using the personal weather report. That's probably one of the most valuable things that I developed, which allows you to talk about yourself and share that and then observe what happens when you do. because it's not about getting other people to do what we want. It's about saying what we want and seeing what other people do, right? And that's a big distinction, right? So it's not about getting people to do what we want, but it is about getting us to the place of having a look at what other people do. And we always know, the two big caveats that I have in life is your behavior is your belief. So always believe behavior of other people, right? Anybody's behavior, in my opinion, is a demonstration of their beliefs. They can say whatever they want to say, but it's what they do that matters. So always believe the behavior, and if it's backed up and in alignment and the same as the words, great. But if they say all the right things and do the wrong things, believe the behavior. That's one of the ways for whipping off those rose-colored glasses and seeing the red flags, is believe the behavior. Someone asked me the other day, what's one way to see a red flag if you just started dating someone? And I said, see how they treat the waitstaff when you go out to dinner. They said, well, what do you mean? Are they kind? Are they polite? Are they respectful? Do they have manners? Or are they demanding? Do they leave a generous tip? That tells you something about someone. Observe these things. So important. So when we have found ourselves in a relationship, and maybe you moved away with your partner and you had a good life and you only saw the in-laws occasionally, and then for some reason you had to move back and they become an intrusive part of your life. Maybe some of the things that I've said today will help you. And as I said, if you have any questions about anything else, now is the time, because I'm going to draw this to a close if there are no questions about anything in your life. So you're welcome to ask them in the chat. So we have about 5 minutes left, unless there are some questions there. And I want to remind you about the podcasts. If you're not listening to Transforming Relationship with Emotional Savvy, that's where I put all the interviews with all these fabulous people. So you can find that anywhere you like to get podcasts. The other one is called Save Your Sanity, Help with Toxic Relationships. And again, that's very specific. That's just me talking to the camera about these very specific pieces. Then if you want other takes on other things, of course, I've made lots of videos here on YouTube. So you can find those. I've written 16 books. You can read those. You can go to transformingrelationship.com and go to the blog navigation tab. You can read blogs. So much there for you. And then again, if you'd like to talk in a group safely off social media, you can go to transformingrelationship.com and click on circles. And then that is all secretly on my website. It works like Facebook, but nobody can find you. Nobody can lurk. Nobody can come into the group pretending to be somebody else. So it's a safer place to be. And I do my very best to keep it the safest place we can. So those are the things that I had to talk to you about tonight. Now, yesterday's podcast was on coercive control, sneaky, subtle, sadistic forms of domination. I highly recommend that you listen to that if you are experiencing any of that. It'll help you recognize at a finer tuned level what these ideas about coercive control are. They're all forms of abuse, some of them small things, but they all happen repeatedly, and they particularly happen when we are in relationship with hijackals. And these are the things that if you are still in a relationship and you are having difficulties, maybe you're getting into fights, maybe there's some physical violence threatened, or things are getting heated in your home, every time that you call a police officer to come, you need to talk about the things that fall in the category of coercive control. Because it's not enough that they just take note of whether you're bleeding. It needs to be noted that you are bleeding inside. And that is something that needs to be written down and taken into consideration, because when you go to court, and there have been many times that you have called the police for help with this kind of thing, if you're in an enlightened city or state or country, they're going to say, wow, this has happened many times. If you're in a state that hasn't kept up with anything and is still a kind of closed shop, they're going to say, oh, look at the nuisance factor. I know that it's wrong. It's totally wrong, but it's very important for you to understand what is going on that is abusive. So that's what you'll find under coercive control. So I hope this has been helpful to you tonight. I don't see any questions, so I am going to end our session, and I hope that you'll come by. I hope you've subscribed. Just hit the red subscribe button and then the little bell next to it, and you will be reminded when something new comes from me. And if you think any of your friends would like to listen, please invite them to come along, or share the replay links and suggest to them to subscribe. All of these things are there for you. And if you are ready to work with me personally and you are a new client, go to beaclient.com and you can have your first full hour session for only $97. So there's lots of ways for us to work together, and I look forward to doing that. And in the meantime, God bless you, and thank you too, Megan. I'm glad you were here, and I'll look forward to talking with you again soon. Take good care. Good night.